But as with the summit, it's about working together about what can we do, what can the GPs do, what can the rest of primary care do to support each other. So things like looking at pharmacists perhaps being able to prescribe prescriptions themselves, which is the case in Wales, but also it's about what can we do together in Portsmouth to say to central government, you need to help us to speak with one voice, which is what we do so well in the city in terms of integration, and because we will work together, the NHS, the City Council and other partners as well. So this is a really thorough report. I completely support it. I'm really looking forward to the GP Summit on the 4th of August. I will be there, as will many other colleagues from Health and Care in the city. And I think we're in a better place than a lot of people to react to this because we work so closely together. But also, if we can do things here, we can share that with other places as well. And I think that cannot be underestimated. This is an issue nationally. It's an issue that has been ignored for far too long by central governments. People have been warned about this time and time and time again, but we know GP services are on the point of falling over. So, thanks for the reports. Thanks for the content of the reports, but also my thanks to the GPs and to everyone who's working in primary care, but also my pledge to the people of this city is we are working together to do the very best we can, and that is our number one priority. That's certainly my number one priority as Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care at this moment in time, is make it feel like if you need to see a GP and have access to GPs, it's in the right way and it's communicated properly, bearing in mind we do have all these constraints and difficulties at this time. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Councillor Winnington. Councillor Lee Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to come in and make a couple of comments. I mean, you will all be aware that we've been running for the last month a campaign for more GPs in Portsmouth, and we've heard a lot of stories. Some of them shocking, some of them very worrying indeed, and some of them, really great stories about the service that the people have received. And I think what I've learned from doing this, by actually speaking to people, rather than arguing on television and in the press about £6,000 earrings, Prada suits and shoes, which these Tory contestants seem to want to talk about, rather than things that really matter to people, which is GPs, policing, and the serious things that get done by local authorities like this and groups like ours. One of the things I think that's really come out this, and I hope that we will see happen, is the issue that Councillor Winnington touched on, because I actually took the trouble to speak to a GP yesterday as well. And I read too in the Telegraph over the weekend, it says it here, why the Tories need to talk about the NHS, but it was an interesting article and it was quite constructive. And it says here that GPs spend 20% of their time doing paperwork, and probably about half of that is necessary. So, for example, what went down with this particular GP that I was speaking to yesterday was the intention to get pharmacies, chemists, pharmacists, to issue the prescriptions, because it's quite a lark. You've got to go in, you've got to go online, you've got to reorder your prescription. The GP then has to sit down and write, issue it, then has to be sent off again. So that is a way of reducing paperwork. So that's something our campaign is looking at. But it is shocking that a city like this, which has to, bring in another 17,700 homes, which amounts to probably something like 35,000, 45,000 new residents, there's what we do in this country. We always put the cart before the horse. And so when we have to argue the case about these homes, it's all integrated, all matters. People say to us, but what about the GPs? What about the school classes? What about all these other things that matter before you do these developments? And they don't quite get it, that it's not us doing that, it is the government. So the government fails in every single regard. It is not serious about delivering good public services for people, and that is what people want, and GPs are one of those services. So here in Portsmouth, we're doing what we can in order to bring about a consistent service that everybody can access when they need a GP. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of the online technology works, and a lot of the telephoning is good for people too. That was mentioned a lot, that some people like telephoning the GP and getting it back that way. But when you really need to see a GP, you need to see a GP, and that too often is not happening. So I very much welcome the report. I'm very grateful for all the GPs, their support staff in particular. I know that they are very short on staff, support staff as well. So I want to thank all of them, as indeed has been said already, and everybody else, and including St Mary's walk-in centre, which is a most marvellous service, which I experienced yesterday. Tremendous service. So we're very lucky in many regards, but we have to get consistency for everybody to see a GP when they want or need to see a GP. So thank you very much, gents, for the report, gents and ladies, for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Does anyone else want to speak on this? No, it is a briefing report, but I'm not surprised that it's stimulated such discussion, because it is something that is so important to people. And as I said to someone the other day when we were out talking to residents, it's when you have a family member who needs a GP and you can't get one that you really feel the seriousness of it, even though we read loads of papers and things. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of the GP Summit on the 4th of August. So thank you very much for the report, and it is duly noted. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Local Development Scheme, which I believe Ian Maguire is going to present. Is that correct?
That is correct, thank you. Good afternoon, members. The Local Development Scheme is the timetable for your local plan. This report has been brought forward to update you on the timetable for both your local plan, the Portsmouth Development Plan, and the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, which is carried out by Hampshire County Council on our behalf and with our partnership. Members will of course know that the pause to the Tipner development in October 2021 required us to revisit the timeline so we could look at the implications of reducing housing on that site to the overall spatial strategy. That is now coming to the end of those discussions, and consequently we're able to provide an updated timetable which confirms that the next round of consultation, the Regulation 19 round of consultation, would now be proposed for spring 2023. Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, also covered by this, as I say. Hampshire County Council have updated their timeline as well. They're proposing their next activity, also a Regulation 19 consultation in June, October 2023. I think the rest of the report is largely self-explanatory. Obviously happy to take any questions, but hope their report covers those issues for you.
Many thanks, Ian. Members, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Hunt.
Yes, I'm enormously grateful to Mr Maguire and his team and Ms Samuels for all the work that they are doing. They bring a lot of policies together. Now, look, we do get accused sometimes of falling behind on this, but it's a daft accusation. Because as we've seen down the road, if you rush things, which is what some members want us to do, rush things, you get your plan chucked back at you because you haven't got it right. So we're not taking our time, we're working steadily and progressively towards delivering a local plan. And having worked with the Miss Maguire and Tristan and their team, I am confident that we will get our plan accepted by the examiner when they look at it, and then we will be able to go forward with our new plan. But to rush it, just for the sake of rushing it, and because other politicians want us to rush it, it is not on. So I'm very grateful for them, but for moving steadily, progressively, and as fast as they can with the Regulation 18 and moving towards Regulation 19. And we have been open and transparent with our opposition colleagues. I understand I was involved with the 13th cross-party leaders group meeting, unlucky for some perhaps, but there have been 12 before that. So we have been very frank, open and honest with them as to how this process is moving. And that is great, because we are in a minority administration, we know that, and we respect the situation. So we have to take everybody with us, and I hope that that is also a mutual position with our opposition colleagues. We want this to be a successful city. We want to plan for the future, and with the officers that we have right now, I'm certain that will be the case.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. I do think it's worth mentioning the fact that away from the decision-making process, a lot of members of other political groups on this council have had an awful lot to say about the local plan and about the Tipner West proposals, etc. But yet again, we are in a decision-making meeting today where we're considering elements of this, and they're not here. So the public forum that they have to come and express those views and make their views heard at a point where they might be able to influence the outcome, they yet again abrogate that responsibility, but they will no doubt be giving more interviews to the press about how we delay things or we rush things. It's not on. It's got to stop, because this council has to come together to pass its new local plan. So people can continue to snipe from the sidelines or sit in meetings and not comment, keep their powder dry and wait, hoping for political advantage, or they can come together collectively and do what's right for this city, and I hope it's the latter.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. Councillor Pasakali.
Yes, not wishing to take odds with my colleague there, but just to mention there is actually one political group leader available, which is Councillor Madrick upstairs, so he is here. Well, yeah, but at least he's watching, so he is here.
Point taken. Point taken. Any other comments or questions? No, thank you. So this item has some recommendations. So the recommendations are to approve the revised local plan timetable set out in the report for the local development scheme plus the minerals and waste development scheme. Second thing is to grant delegated authority to the Assistant Director of Planning and Economic Growth to make minor amendments to those reports, to those plans, sorry. And the third one is to note the progression of other Portsmouth Development Plan documents and supporting planning policy documents. Do we agree with those recommendations, colleagues? Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Ian and Tristan, for that report. Okay, so the next item, which is item 6, which remains on the order paper, is the Tipner West development, but this item will now be considered at a special meeting of the Cabinet on the 6th of September 2022 for onward submission to an extraordinary full council meeting. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I just want to explain why that has happened. We had this group leaders meeting on Friday. As I say, we remained open and transparent, and I heard what the news said, that 1 minute we're dithering, the next minute we're rushing and so on. It's not true, and I completely reject that. The group leaders, in this case, we had a briefing about it. What we've agreed to do is to brief, they asked for it and we agreed it, is for them all, so the Labour group, the Conservative group, and the Portsmouth Independents will all have their own briefing if they wish. I did suggest that maybe they should all want to have a briefing together to save more time, but no, they didn't want that. They wanted separate briefings. So that is what is going to happen. So that's why this report is not here today. I was hoping it would be here because I want to move on, but it's not here. So we have to wait, and those are going to be arranged as soon as possible. So I look forward to having that report back as soon as reasonably practicable.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Okay, so item number 7 is city centre regeneration. Tristan, are you presenting this?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So the city centre area has long been a council priority, and it's a big, complicated beast, as you well know. This report builds on previous city centre reports and sets out how the council's wider agenda to ensure that the city centre and high street plans for economic development and culturally-led regeneration continue to prosper. The report also provides an update on the council's approach to improving the city centre and highlights the progress made to deliver the regeneration of the city centre and the previous, as approved in the previous decisions. I should note that the report also picks up on a number of cross-council and private sector developments that are going on and paints a real picture of progress being made in the area. I'll assume most of the report has been read, but just to take you through the recommendations, the report asks that Cabinet notes the high level of activity taking place in and around the city centre, as referred to in the report and the appendices, along with the proposed stewardship role the Council intends to play to ensure that the future activity and growth in the area is curated sensibly and can be delivered. We also have, as part of our future High Street bidding funding success, taken advantage of a government task force that's come down to provide some advice specifically around unlocking your place potential, and Council is asked to note that and agree that the recommendations and actions suggested in this report are accepted in full. Cabinet is asked to note the progress made by officers on work delegated by Cabinet previously, and to determine the appropriate and achievable delivery strategy for the City Centre North work stream. And Cabinet is asked to note progress made by officers on land assembly, as approved under the previous Cabinet and full Council meetings. Lastly, Cabinet is asked to note the progress made by officers on the development of a meanwhile strategy, following the production of a business justification cases for these proposals. Thank you.
Many thanks, Tristan. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, for those uninitiated, my understanding of the meanwhile strategy is that for the meantime, whilst your buildings are empty, you lever in something interesting, something for people to do. And I've raised this, so for example, you might have a skate park, something like that. But once these things become embedded, they're very difficult to winkle out then. So every time that we have a meanwhile occupation, we need to make it very clear that in due course that they're going to have to move on, and we've worked to find somewhere else for them. So I very much welcome this report. It is a very good report, and it's great. And it comes in 3 elements: the city south, the city north, which I know that Councillor Pitt had a walkabout yesterday, and I would have been with him around the perimeter, except that one of my family decided to throw themselves off a ladder, and so I got taken up with that. But what this means is there's going to, we are seeing a cultural, and I'm sure Councillor Pitt might have something to say about this in a minute, we are seeing a cultural-led regeneration of our city, which was touched on by Mr. Samuels. And in the city south part, that element around Victoria Park, we're going to see the investment in the Guildhall, new theatre hall, and the investment. And this council is very, very good at levering in outside monies from all sorts of other places, from government, from charities, from sports governing bodies, and from conservation bodies. So we're going to see that. I think it's about £2 million worth of investment into Victoria Park. We also see what the university is doing in that area. So there'll be a cultural-led regeneration of the city south, which is really, really welcome. Then to the north, above Charlotte Street, and we see how that will be a homes and green spaces-led regeneration. And people have to come to an understanding that the government is telling us we've got to build 17,700 homes, and that area will form, I think, if I remember, gentlemen, rightly, 2,500 homes or thereabouts. But on the ground floor, we are going to see other related uses, some shopping and cultural-led venues and a new park. And the great thing about doing it in this way is that you then condense the retail area, because we know in Britain that retail floor space is 40% over provided for, which is why there are so many empty shops around in some places. And that will condense the retail floor space into the city centre around Commercial Road. And having all these new people living there and all these visitors coming into the southern element will create a regeneration for the shops and vitality and vibrancy for the shops as well. So it's a very good plan, very different to the previous ideas, but this is Portsmouth City Council leading on this, and it's Portsmouth City Council coming up with this idea, and it's to be welcomed. And I hope that everybody will get behind it, and I thank everybody for their hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you very much, Lee, for your comments on that, all of which you'll know I agree with. I think councils tend to make announcements about things in quite a piecemeal way sometimes, especially when it's a very big area of work and there's lots of sort of staged parts to it. So as part of that, you can lose the overall vision of what you're wanting to achieve, because it looks like you're just delivering little projects and you're not actually delivering an overall vision. So I do think this report goes a long way towards setting that vision and showing how all these various elements of activity interrelate to each other, and that's absolutely crucial. But it's not just crucial in terms of being able to project that vision for what you want for the city centre for the sake of it. It's important because that's the vision that will secure ultimately the investment that we need. The council's capital programme doesn't have hundreds of millions of pounds sloshing around to be able to do all these pieces of work, if only it did, but it doesn't. So what we do need is to be able to work on our partnerships and our relationships with the existing tenants of the high street, but also potential new ones. We need to look at where there's opportunities with developers to hand over maybe spaces and places, and not just hold our hand out and say, give us the cash, because we're going to be in a very competitive environment moving forward. But this is an opportunity to look at all of that activity as a whole. I think it's done a really good job in pulling that together, and it's also taking ownership of some key actions around what the report refers to as repositioning, reinventing, rebranding and restructuring, and that work progressing under those four themes is important to come to a vision, a strategy and a delivery plan that we can actually stick to. So I think we've all been aware of bits and pieces happening, but this does bring everything together in one place, and that shows that across the city centre there is an awful lot happening, and if we're just able to be successful with a couple of funding bids that we've got in at the moment, that would really kick-start this in a very big way. So fingers crossed that happens, but if not, we won't give up. There'll be plan Bs and plan Cs, and it doesn't matter if you don't get every win. What matters is that we know where we want to get to, and whatever the pressure on us, we keep taking an extra step forward to get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to make a comment or ask a question? No, I think just to echo some of the points around the joined-upness of it. I was talking to Councillor Stagg this morning and was saying that the thinking around integrating some of the transport schemes into the overall picture and the narrative is so refreshing, and a lot has been going on for a long time, but this just feels like it's aligned and there's a clear vision. So thank you very much to people who have written this report. Tristan did list all the recommendations, so I won't read them all again, but colleagues, are we happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so item 8 is the response to the Traffic, Environment and Community Safety Scrutiny Panel's recommendations regarding biodiversity. Who's presenting this? James is presenting it. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to briefly present the report to you, which Cabinet will note has several directors' names against it, and that reflects the fact that the biodiversity scrutiny and its recommendations are very much cross-cutting, and the implementation will sit with a number of directorates, including Regeneration, Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services, Culture and Leisure and Public Health. I'd just like to put on record a thanks from all of those directorates for the work of Claire Watkins, who sits with Steve Bailey. She's done a brilliant job in providing administrative support and coordinating our response. And also to Kelly Nash and the executive team, who's been very helpful in considering how to respond to some of the recommendations and how they sit with other agendas. So briefly then, there are recommendations which in essence can be incorporated into the business as usual of several service areas and arguably build on work that's already underway. And Phil Bentley will oversee the recommendations linked to housing and our green and clean teams, continuing the greening work across our housing estates. Adrian Rosier will oversee the work of parks and open spaces, and again building on some really significant work on the greening agenda, and Tristan through the COLAS team will continue to respond to those recommendations that sit with the COLAS team. There are some recommendations which our strategy unit, so Kelly Nash, will support, and that recognises the opportunity to tie some work together across a range of linked agendas, for example, the greening strategy, carbon reduction, to name but a few. And they're all arguably inextricably linked to the climate change agenda. So with Councillor Barrett's agreement, the intention is to use the climate change strategy as an overarching strategy for which all the activity can be coordinated better, and that will also then avoid a siloed approach where we might have a single approach to biodiversity, a single approach to greening strategy, when actually they need to be coordinated together. And there's a real opportunity then to think about how we pool resources and report all of that through to the environment and climate change portfolio. Lastly then, just to note that since the report was written and the officers worked together to provide their response, full council has debated the notice of motion concerning pesticides. So the officer recommendation, the report before you, offers commentary from the previous stated position, which is March 2022. So clearly that will need to be updated in light of the recent full council meeting. And there's also been further detail come through from COLAS in terms of their approach to dealing with some of the issues that are within the report. So it may well be, with your agreement, that as soon as possible officers bring forward to the environment and climate change portfolio an updated position, but also the place then to track the work as we take this forward. I've got officers with me if there are any questions.
Many thanks, James. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I say, obviously this has been a huge effort over a number of portfolios, a number of departments, a number of outside organisations. So this really does show, you know, all the hard work that has been put in across various departments. Also, you only need to look on the agenda paper on item 3.3 on the background. You can see the amount of people across different departments, from members here and also from outside bodies that actually got involved. And so I think it really needs to be commended that so many people care about this issue and came forward to offer ideas. So a lot of recommendations that have been put into this paper are things that we, you know, we have been working on for some time now. So it's great to see that, you know, members on the text panel do recognise that we are doing a lot of this stuff already, and that they're, I assume, happy to continue supporting that work that we're doing across so many different portfolios going forward. Just an example, you know, and I've had a look at this paper in great detail. Out of the 36 recommendations, 20 of them are things that we've already been working on or are already in our framework. So, you know, we are doing a lot of work already. Obviously, with the 16 other things, you know, we need to look at them going forward, look at the implications, financial implications as well, and see how we can move forward. So that's where we are at the moment. So Yeah, I think it's a really good, also just to mention as well, it's something we do consider as a serious issue. Obviously, we passed the nature emergency motion earlier this year. Since then, we do now have 2 new countryside officers. So, that's something we are taking really seriously, who will work across various different areas of the city. So we've got that going on. And, of course, this is all in line, and they will work with the Parks Department, the offices in my portfolio, the Estate Service. So it really does show going forward that, we're not necessarily working in silos. This is a huge piece of work that we have going forward. Often residents say to me, if they do watch full council as well, that is a bit of a circus and squabbling and bickering. I think this is at least one time that we can say that members across the whole council have had input and we're at the same position going forward. I obviously hope that continues on, and I look forward to more of this coming forward in my own briefings as well. So I just really want to thank everybody who's been involved with this. It does show that we can all work together, and it does show the huge amount of work that has come across literally every single portfolio and from every single cabinet member here. So, yeah, thank you very much for all the work, officers and everybody who've put into this.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Susie. Just to follow on what Kimberly was saying, I think it's encouraging to actually turn up to the scrutiny panel and to listen to the many comments that were put forwards. And so I also, like Kimberly, welcome the report. It does, though, operate, as both you and James have outlined, in a changed context. I think Kimberly was hiding her light under a bushel, because it was her and the rest of the Liberal Democrats who put this city into a nature emergency a few months ago. That's important going forwards. Also, Liberal Democrats supported the motion last week, as did all groups, putting forward a 3-year timescale for phasing out pesticides. That's a changed context to what is in this report. And it is important. I had hoped that someone from the scrutiny panel will be here today to outline this changed context. However, I see a lovely grey chair over there that's empty. I hope that they'll be able to work with us and with all of us going forward to try and make sure we can implement this plan in a changed context. I think one of the key things where I think we, as Kimberly's outlined, where we might differ from the thrust of this is that we see this as part of an overall approach to making our city greener and to tackling the climate emergency. Biodiversity is a key part of making our city greener, but it doesn't live in a silo and it doesn't live on its own. And that's why I think it's very, very, very important that we all work together. Kimberly has mentioned the countryside officers. I know that one of them benefits the area that Councillor Stagg and Councillor Kadir and I are proud to represent. And she's already been talking to local people about how we can get them involved in making our environment better. And that's absolutely crucial, because if we don't involve people, particularly if we don't involve the children of this city, then frankly we will have failed as slightly older people. I think. So I think there is an issue about integration, which we will work on. We look at this report in the context of the changed approach. So, for instance, the report talks about a ban on pesticides on council allotments. It's not clear how that works with the 3-year phasing out. But I'm sure everyone will work on that together. I know that, for instance, on the housing estates in Buckland, we will be trying a pesticide-free approach, which is called New Way, I think it's called, which it certainly will be. And hopefully we can roll that out across the city. We don't underestimate the problems, but we don't underestimate the opportunities either. So I welcome this report, and I look forward to progress and updates as we go forwards. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Can I just make a point? I know, Councillor Stagg, you want to come in, but whilst I'm happy to endorse your point about people maybe not attending the meeting, I think we need to be mindful that some people might have reasons not to attend the meeting, for example, childcare or something like that. So, accept the point, but I just think we need to make sure that we understand why people haven't turned up to a meeting. Councillor Stagg.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to focus in on one particular aspect. It's mentioned in the report, and that is the involvement of schools. And I'm very, very keen to involve more schools across the city, not just individual schools. For one thing, school children are a free resource. I mean, there's no drain on the council whatsoever, and they love it because if they get their hands dirty, they're messy. It's wonderful, and I've done this at the Baffins Pond Association. Got whips free from Woodland Trust. The children have planted them up. We've looked after them at the Baffins Pond Association, but they could do this in schools. Grow them on for 1 or 2 years. When they're big enough, then they can be planted out. Now, I believe there's something like 67 primary schools altogether in the city. Is it 67, 68?
63.
Oh, sorry. Well, they're less than I thought. But anyway, if every school planted 100 whips and they all matured, that's 6,300 semi-mature trees that could be going in a few years' time. And the kids love it. And if you catch children between the ages of 5 and 7, you've got them for life, because nobody will touch those trees that they have planted. They will watch everybody going by. Anybody who nicks a twig off the tree, they'll have a good going over by the children. Not in a really nasty way, I hasten to add. But I think that it's a case about bringing together the local community, because yes, we can do a lot as a council. We've got more resources, but there you've got a free resource. You've got keen people. The trees themselves, the whips are free. Get them from the Woodland Trust. You get them in multiples of, I think it goes up to about 720 you can get. I think the last lot I got was about 480, which we planted on Baffin's Field. They didn't all survive, but nevertheless, a lot of them are still there. Planting season, it starts from September onwards, so get the schools involved early on, so September, October. But also we've got a lot going on with the community. You've mentioned about the community wildlife rangers. There's the community orchard people. They're a couple of local residents who have planted trees. I mean, we've helped down at Tamworth Park in putting in trees. And they do it, and they love it. And again, it's involving the community. In transport, we're trying our best, not succeeding very well, I have to admit, in getting bus shelters with green roofs. But we have a contract with Clear Channel, which makes us, we can't go outside of that contract, and they're not sort of responding as well as they could be. But we would like to see green roofs right through the city. Not all in one go, we phase it in. Colas, I think, has already been mentioned. They're extending their wildflower meadows, etc. So I think it's right across the board. We are all working together as a city, and I think it's great. But let's please focus on those kids. They are magic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. Yeah, it was a really good report, very welcome. Just a couple of points from me. One is, I think what comes across really clearly is that interrelationship of these issues, and depending on which way you slice it, it becomes a priority for somebody else. And I think our commitment to work cross-portfolio, but also cross-directorate on this, is really coming through in the comments, but also came through in the report. So we've always got more work to do, and the pace of change around these issues is quite phenomenal. When we look at the potential jobs of the future in terms of, environmental jobs, kids starting school now will be doing jobs that we can't even dream of. So this is a fast changing world, and we're both responding to crisis, but we're also trying to plan for the future. And I think that comes through in a lot of the comments. Just on the school stuff, I couldn't agree with you more, Councillor Stagg. There's nothing, obviously, being a former primary school teacher, I'm going to say this, but actually, joking apart from the free labour thing, which I think is quite funny, about planting trees, and Manor Infant School, for example, just do a shout out to them, because they've really engaged this agenda, and some of the community events around there, working with partners, but also kids, families, there's just untold benefits to the kind of, it's almost like that nature itself just provides this ongoing catalyst for so many other issues that we're trying to tackle around health, around education, and around helping families, etc. So I think it's really brilliant. But the other thing is the what I used to call the pester power aspect of it, is that if we want to get messages out, we spend a long time doing press releases and trying to get politicians making comments and videos. And actually, one of the most powerful ways to get messages to our residents who are parents is through what we used to call through the book bag, but I think it's a bit more electronic nowadays. Probably Councillor Barrett can testify to that. But actually, it's kids going home being excited and telling their parents how they need to change their behaviour is a really good aspect for us to focus on. So thank you very much for the report and to the whole panel for undertaking this review. And we've made comments about the recommendations that are already in train, but also things that are going to happen looking forward. So I'm assuming, colleagues, that we accept these recommendations. Thank you. Okay, so the next item is item 9, which is the appointments to outside bodies and member champion appointment.
Susie, before we go on, sorry, I've just been alerted by someone who's actually trying to watch this discussion that actually the video stream isn't working. So I don't know if that's right or not, Anna, but that's probably an improvement. You can't see any of us. But I just thought I'd alert you that the IT is being its usual fantastic self.
Thank you. So, should we go on to item 9, appointments to outside bodies and member champion appointments? Is that, who's presenting this? Is anyone presenting this? No?
I'll present it if you like, Chair. Members, I don't think there's anything to add to the report. The proposals, I think, are set out in the paper for your confirmation.
Thank you. So I just have one comment. So just to go through the recommendations or the information on here, the Elementary Education Act Trust Board, there were 2 appointments required, and the appointments made by Cabinet on the 21st of June were Councillor Vernon Jackson and Councillor Ryan Brent. There were no further nominations received despite a request by Cabinet, so that will have to remain as it is without representation from the other groups. The Port Advisory Board, there are no further nominations received following a request by Cabinet on the 21st of June. And the King's Theatre Trust, there's 2 appointments required. I believe that was going to go to interviews, and I believe those interviews have not happened. It looks like Councillor Pitt can update me.
Yeah, I might be able to help here, Councillor Horton. In discussion, when there was a representation coming from the chair of the King's Theatre Trust to temporarily postpone the appointment of new trustees to the board as they are in final complex negotiations over a repairs budget, etc., allocated to the building, all of which has been through public decision making, but they just want to get that concluded before the appointment takes place. So the request today is to postpone for a period of no greater than 6 months before those appointments are taken up, to allow that work to conclude. That's for Cabinet to consider whether that's appropriate or not. We've got Deputy Monitoring Officer with us and also the Chief Exec, who may have a view on that. Apologies that hasn't come in for a more formal route, but I was copied in on the email at the end of last week. Obviously it coincided with the leader going on leave.
Thank you for that update, Councillor Pitt. Is there any recommendation from anyone?
No, there's nothing to add from the Monitoring Officer's point of view.
Any comment? No?
It's entirely up to Cabinet. I think it's perfectly appropriate to defer if that's what you wish.
Cabinet?
So just for clarity, that would be from today a postponement of no more than 6 months. If it reached 6 months and the negotiations hadn't concluded, which I don't think is going to happen, but just in case, the appointments would still need to be made.
Councillor Fazakerley.
Yeah, it'd just be useful to get some, I presume there's no legal problems with that, but it does seem unusual for me, because obviously lots of organisations change due to changes of membership for whatever reason, and seeking to, in effect, stop 2 new appointments simply because of that, I don't follow on that one, to be honest. It seems to me somewhat democratic for people not to be expected that they'll be able to grasp what's going on when they enter that particular role. I'm sure most of us at one stage or another have either changed committees or changed organisations whereby you have to come in. You don't have the luxury of starting from the very beginning. So I would feel unhappy about that, to be personally honest. I don't think that gives much confidence in the people that are actually down for nomination, because I'm sure each of them are proficient enough to be able to grasp what's going on. So personally, my own gut feeling is no, I don't think we should hold back.
Any other comments? Councillor Pitt.
Yeah, just for clarity, Chair, it's not that there's any dispute about councillors' ability to get up to speed, and let's be clear, there are a collection of nominations. There's no councillors even been identified, so this is not about that. The request from the Chair is that there is no councillor appointment to the board at all, for the reason that the board is currently negotiating directly with the council, and they see a conflict behind having councillors newly appointed to the board at the time that they are actually negotiating with that entity. Now, that's their view. We can take a different view to that. We're perfectly entitled to do so, but that's where it's coming from. It's not about questioning the ability of people to catch up, or, whether they add value or anything else. It's nothing to do with any of those things. It's just about the fact that there is this negotiation in place, and the board think they can conclude that more effectively and more quickly without those appointees on the board. And it's for this meeting to decide whether that's appropriate or not.
Any other comments from Cabinet view on this? I'm completely unsighted on this, so an email exchange has occurred. You don't happen to know what the leader thought about that? No, because he's gone on holiday.
I know verbally that he said he had no objection to it.
Okay. Cabinet.
I don't think it'd make any difference if we were on there or not, quite honestly. I can see where they're coming from. They think that we might try and impose the council's view indirectly around the back, as it were. So if it makes that, I'm disagreeing with Jason, I suppose, but if it makes them feel happier and they feel it's a more transparent and open process, and a better process by not having us on there, if that makes them happier, I'm okay with that. But I would reassure them that we are really used to wearing several hats, and I am confident that whichever representative was on there would declare an interest if they needed to, and remove themselves from any discussion like that. And I also think that they would put the interests of the King's Theatre first. I mean, that's what I would be able to do. So I'm not fussed either way, but I think if it makes them happier and improves our relationship with them in that way, and they trust us more as a result, then that can only be a good thing. So I would agree then to defer that particular element of the report as they have requested.
Okay then, so what I'm hearing from some people, what about then if we defer it today, but we try and track down their rationale through the email, and also to see if that they have any idea of when that might happen. You say it's a maximum of 6 months, and just express feelings from Cabinet that actually we would rather it sooner than later, if that was possible, but we would respect it because of the reasons that Lee's outlined around maintaining positive relationships, that we respect what they're requesting in the short term, with some urgency around actually getting representation. Councillor Winnington.
Thanks, Susie. Yeah, I think that's a sensible thing. One thing I would be concerned about leaving it as long as 6 months is, though obviously we're looking at this particular negotiation, there's also all the other things that go on at the King's Theatre, and I would be a little bit uncomfortable leaving it a full up to 6 months to have no council representatives, no councillor representatives on there, as we are obviously have the have the right to have trustees on that committee. But I would also agree with Councillors Padaki and Hunt that that obviously we are well used to being on bodies where you have to put the needs of that body first. I'm back on the Southern Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, and there's been some occasions whereby, as the appointee there, I am putting their interest first and what's right for them, that I see within the context of the whole of the area, for example. So so I think your proposal is sensible, and I think that's the best way forwards. But yeah, because I think 6 months is with everything else is just a bit too long a period. Thank
you, Councillor Whittington. Councillor Hunt.
Yes, slightly changing my view with the discussion, which is what it's all about. No, I agree. I was happy to go for 6 months, but Matthew and Steve, whilst they were talking, I reminded myself there's a lot of public money involved in the King's Theatre, and that's one of the reasons why we're there, to look after public money. So I think that getting this resolved as quickly as is possible, as you suggest, to bring it back as soon as is possible, resolved, would be a good thing.
So we are, what we're asking Cabinet to agree is in support of a deferral with a request for urgency in getting the appointments made. And also, I think it might be sensible just to get a statement to Cabinet around, or circulated around what the reasoning was. But I'm quite happy to propose that if colleagues are happy to accept that proposal.
You were going to say something.
Who?
Yeah, but Jason's got his light on.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I know my place, David. You go first and I'll come second.
Well, all I was going to suggest is that we bring it back to you, next cycle. Yeah.
Councillor Pesticides.
We're unencumbered in making the decision as far as we're concerned.
Well, I seem to be the only one in the trench. There's no one standing shoulder to shoulder with me, so I feel I may be the sacrifice. I just wanted to clarify a timescale on that. Obviously, colleagues have given their views. I'll go along with what colleagues' wishes are, because I'm not going to win on my own anyway. But can we give a timescale of when we can come back? When you say defer, I wouldn't be happy with Steve's 6 months thing they've given to us. So
I think that's what the Chief Exec was saying, is let's bring it back to the next Cabinet meeting for an update.
Which is, remind us?
Well, the next one now is the 6th, but that is the Tipner meeting. Ordinarily, it would be into end of September. 27th of September. Does that sound okay?
Well, it sounds a valid date, but there you are.
It's in the diary.
Okay, colleagues agreed on that? Thank you. It's always the okay. And the final bit on this, which is the LGBTQ plus People's Members Champion, this really is around young people and their request for being able to do what we did last time, which is to meet their potential champions and actually express a view on them. And they they want that to happen. Of course, we've hit school holidays, so that was part of the reason it was sort of pushed back. But also, they've corresponded with me to say that actually one of the things that we as a council have been doing is working very closely with Stonewall, and Stonewall run members training on engaging with LGBTQ issues, and they would like to know which members have engaged in that training, and I imagine my powers of deduction that might influence their view on the people putting themselves forward to be their champion. So I think they're very good reasons. It is pushed back, further than I'd ideally want, but that I understand is being arranged for September. So if members are happy to defer that process or endorse the request to defer that process, that would be great. Agree? Thank you very much. Okay, so now on to the exciting items. Item 10, Local Partnerships Governance Review. Over to David.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess this paper is very much about distinctions and clarity and some of the issues we've just been touching on, actually, in terms of the number of hats we wear. And the first distinction, I guess, I draw to your attention is at the top of page 5 on your agenda, you'll see a heading saying, the Council as Company Owner. And members, you're very familiar with this debate about how when we operate wholly owned companies under company law and we operate as a council under public law, how do we get the appropriate distinctions in terms of the roles that we play? And we commissioned the local partnerships to do some work with us, to advise us on this. Their report is attached to the paper that you've got today. So what we're trying to do, and we've had several sort of gnaws on this bone, I guess, but what we're trying to do is just to make sure that we've got appropriate distinction as a council between the roles that we play as the owners of individual companies and the role that we play as a public authority as the shareholder for those companies. And this paper attaches to it their report, which includes a number of recommendations, and there are in particular 2 areas that are brought to your attention for decision today. The first is to develop an action plan to implement the recommendations, and in so doing so, you're advised as a cabinet to identify one of your member as a portfolio lead for the council's company matters. So that would be our entire range of companies. And the other is, and I think this is something that local partnerships have been at pains to emphasise, and we see it played out actually nationally. You'll have seen it in the local government press through SIPFA and other bodies about making sure that local authorities have a clear distinction between their role as a company owner and the advice they receive as the shareholder. And we did have a situation where we had directors of the council who were also directors of our wholly owned companies. What local partnership are quite rightly saying is that we should make it absolutely clear who's performing which role, and they have recommended, and we have followed that recommendation, that our council directors do not perform the role as directors of our wholly owned companies, so that their position is unencumbered and reserved to advise you as the cabinet, as the shareholder, about the propositions that our individual companies may have. Yeah. So those people who are directors of the company, their responsibility as directors of the company are to that company. The cabinet influences the direction of those companies through approving the business plans of each of those companies, through the funding arrangements that those companies might seek from you. So it's really important that we have that clarity. Chris has stepped down as the director of one of those companies, as has Mike Sellers. I think the Portico example is a good one. So we have got staff through Portico, and we've got some external specialists in the field on the board of Portico. Mike Sellers has disengaged himself from that in order to be unencumbered to advise you as the shareholder through your cabinet role about the merits or demerits of what the company is proposing on your behalf. So that really is what the report is about. And largely for presentational reasons, but again about that focus and clarity, it is recommending that your chief executive acts as the focal point for those pieces of technical advice to you as the shareholder, to you as cabinet. Yeah, so at cabinet you may well hear from the directors of the company but they have a company hat on. From your council directors and from myself, you will hear it through the eyes of the council, through the eyes of the shareholder. So that's what those two recommendations are for. So first of all, to agree to, you don't need to do it today, but to agree to identify a cabinet member who can perform that member role, and that will include facilitating cross-party engagement, and for myself as the chief executive to galvanise the technical advice to you as the shareholder of all of those different companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much for explaining that so clearly. Are there any comments or questions from Cabinet? No? I think those recommendations were clearly laid out, and I think we accept them, and we will move forward with that plan and that decision. In agreement, everyone? Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, David. The next item is about the exclusion of press and public. This is where I feel like I'm channeling Gerald here. We have the information which is confidential, and I guess the question is, do we think that we'd be able to talk about the next item without making reference to the detail in that confidential document? Can I have so Councillor Hunt thinks
yes.
Yes,
I think so. And if we have to talk about it, then we just do the exclusion.
Does anyone have a different opinion?
I think, and I'll stand to be corrected, but I think our normal practice is to move the motion, but not to refer to the orange papers unless we absolutely have to. But I think by moving the motion, it then protects the integrity of the orange papers for the purposes of minutes, etc.
Okay. Will you move the motion? Yes. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So, we go on to item 12. Councillors, company owner, Hambrook Street. That's Tristan. Yes?
Thank you, Chair. And this item follows nicely on from the Local Partnerships Governance Review, and just for the record, I should note that I've also stepped down as Director of Ravelin Group Limited, in line with those the guidance. So the previous papers have been presented to Cabinet as shareholder on matters around Ravelin. This paper seeks approval to set up a holding company for the completed asset, which should be completed early next year, for Hambrook Street, a previous approval by the shareholder. Just an anomaly here, to approve a new company as laid out in the guidance given, you also need to approve the business plan for that company, the business case, and so you'll find that this isn't just a request from Cabinet to allow us to set up a new company, but also to approve the business case, which explains how that company will be used. The recommendations are fairly straightforward. Approve the business case for setting up the company as appended. Delegate authority to the Director of Regen in consultation with the City Solicitor and the Section 151 Officer to set up the company, appoint suitably qualified directors, and set up governance arrangements necessary for the company to start trading, with an obligation to report regularly to Cabinet on the company's performance. And lastly, to delegate authority to the Director of Finance and the Section 151 Officer in consultation with the directors of the company to agree the mortgage lending agreement to fund the property transfer. The rest of it I'll take as read. Thanks.
Thank you, Tristan. Do any members have any comments or questions?
Not really on the paper, so I was just wondering, reflecting on the previous report and what Tristan Samuels has just said, where he said that, how are we recruiting these directors to replace those people who are stepping down? And is there any input from the shareholder about the directors going onto those boards?
Yeah, we are going to the marketplace in terms of taking advice about experts in the fields in order to try to recruit appropriate directors for those companies. And I think the Portico example is a good one there. I mean, clearly, in the field of ports, whilst we have our own staff, our own experts, getting that broader experience from elsewhere is really valuable. We take expert advice in finding our experts.
All right, and I'll write you separately.
Sure? Okay, good question. Good question. Any other questions or comments on this? So, okay, I think Tristan went through the recommendations really clearly, so I won't repeat them again. Cabinet happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you. On to item 13, which is specifically around Ravlin. This is a company report, and I think we're back to Tristan.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, in line with good governance processes and the shareholders' request for regular updates brought to this forum, this is a finance report in one way, of a quarterly update provided on the performance of the company. Hopefully you can, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you. Cabinet, do you have any comments or questions? All is quiet, in which case I assume that people have read it and agree with the report, and it's just an update. And the recommendations that we note and approve this quarterly update, to approve the financial accounts for the company for the period ending 31st of March, to note the progress reported on the existing project at Brewery House, Hambrook Street, note the appointment of 2 non-exec directors and the formal board meeting that was held on the 12th of April. Note the engagement and collaboration of the company with the council on the Horatio and Leamington private build-to-rent units in Somerstown is progressing in line with the approved development pipeline with a 5-year business plan. And note, finally, the Director of Regeneration is no longer a board member, as he has just said at the beginning of his report. Are we all happy with that and agree? Thank you, colleagues. Last but not least is the Treasury Management outturn, which is over to Chris. I can always hear Gerald making a comment about it being deeply dull or something like that, knowing him. Okay, over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. This is what's described as the Treasury Management Outturn Report for last financial year. The Council has an obligation to report on its activities every year after the end of the financial year. It's a noting report for you, Cabinet. It's also a noting report that goes on to full Council. The content of it really confirms that the Council remained within its prudential and Treasury management indicators that it approved in the March prior to the financial year itself. So it's a noting report, and the Council remained within all of its indicators that it approved that it would. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a noting report. Are there any comments or questions on that, Cabinet? No, in which case we are in agreement that we note it. And that, I believe, brings us to the end of this 14-item agenda. And thank you very much to officers for all their reports and their time today. And thank you very much to my colleagues for this meeting. And I duly finish this meeting at 13:18.